State of Society Part 5, Session 2. Last week we began a new topic, namely law and order. It was a very full session which we will do well to return to and look at once again in the archives once we get a chance to do so. We said that at the start that crime and criminality stems mainly from the iniquitous situation that exists in all countries where the socio-economic situation there, there have led to breakdowns in law and order and has forced many in these societies to become criminals. We looked at what H.G. Wells had said about crime and society and the relationships thereto. Crime and bad lives are the measure of a state's failure. All crime in the end is the crime of the community. We also said that the majority of crimes took place not in the upper classes of society, but in the lower and lower middle classes. And the only reason surmised for this is the straightened socio-economic conditions existing in these communities. What do we make of this? Then turn to discuss policing, improvements thereto in terms of goals, modus operandi, critical success factors, cooperation with the communities that are policed, the continuous audit of the police service, and police officers. We also discussed what technologies can assist the police service and the general need to have officers proficient in the use of these technologies on an ongoing basis. The need to have cross-border cooperation with other police services around the world, especially in intelligence gathering, interdiction, prosecution, and conviction of narco criminals, were also stressed. With respect to the judiciary, judicial reforms looked at the efficient and effective clearing of the backlog of cases, reforms of trial by jury cases, into trial by judge cases, procedural rules, decriminalization of drug users, plea bargaining, audit of day to day operations, and finally, the affordability and access of the system by lower income citizens. What do we make of all of this, having had a week to consider the judicial system in one's own country? And began to look at the penal system in one's own country. We started improvements to the penal system. Prison systems, particularly throughout the developing world, are notably harsh and inhumane in many countries. Many have failed to meet even the most basic standards of upkeep and have been described in one country as appalling, wretched, repulsive, and hideous. With the prospects of employment very dim for ex-inmates, recidivism levels are particularly high, as much as 61% in one country, simply to be able to receive 3 square meals a day. To emphasize the point of wretchedness in some of these facilities, some prisons still use the primitive pail system from the 19th century for prisoners to use for defecation, and overcrowding in small enclosed all the attendant sexual abuse and disease contagion. This treatment stems from the belief by the general community that prisoners have forfeited their human rights when they commit crimes and are convicted. The community sees no obligation in providing humane habitation and do not press the authorities to provide safe or even reform the general approach to incarceration. Stringent financial circumstances that most developing countries find themselves, the use of these resources for health services, education, national security, and infrastructure are seen as more desirable expenditures. If penal reform is to take place, this negative perspective by the community must change first if there are to be movement here. With the advent of an SVT economy, the prospects for gainful employment, even for ex-inmates, is a real one. Recidivism substantially. Pressure on the penal system will also reduce. The more civilized circumstances that SVT will bring about will change the approach in the system from one of punishment to rehabilitation of inmates. How is the penal system in one's own country? Is it satisfactory? What do we make of it? What do we make of what has been said thus far with the penal system? The best approach to reform would not only include the provision of more modern and humane facilities, but also standards of treatment that conform to international standards for the treatment of the incarcerated. These standards are best exemplified by the American Correction Association Standards and Accreditation, ACASA, and was set by a committee of architects, legal experts, doctors, and experts in correction facilities. These standards ensure that human rights are at the center of the goal of incarceration, but safety, security, mental and physical health are no less important. The rehabilitative process is also at the center of operations of the prison system, and the goal is to return the inmate to the community a fully reformed and potentially productive individual. Are these the goals worth pursuing in any proposed prison reform proposal in any country? ACASA recommends annual every penal facility after providing modern and humane facilities. The elements of the audit include 1. Security of facility, 2. Order, 3. Safety, 4. Care, 5. Activity, 6. Justice, 7. Conditions, and 8. Management. The first, security of the facility, is an examination and report on security protocols, significant incidences, drug use, freedom of movement, community exposure, and staff deficiencies. The second element, order, is to do with use of force by staff, as well as inmate misconduct, perceived control, and strictness of enforcement. Safety, the third item, should do with the safety and or dangerousness of inmates, the environment, as well as staff adequacy in treating with these situations. Care, the fourth, is to do with desired health services, mental health care, dental services, counseling services, and rehabilitation programs and services. With respect to activity, this is regarding religious and recreational activities and the inmates' involvement in and evaluation of these matters, as well as other work and industry matters. Justice includes for staff, fairness, and use of force, the type and number of grievances, and the process for recording same. Justice also includes for the disciplinary process, access to legal resources for inmates, and any delay in the process of justice. Conditions, of course, relate to the prison conditions, such as space allocation for living conditions and maintenance of same, noise levels, sanitation, food quality, visitation, community access, and commissary. And finally, management would include for staff job satisfaction, staff turnover, burnout and stress levels, staff expertise and experience, training, education, salary and overtime issues, staff efficiency, and management staff relations. There is no doubt that if audits of these matters are conducted annually and deficiencies unearthed are acted upon genuinely, there will be wholesale improvements in prison conditions in the medium to long term. Inmates exiting the system would leave as far better persons than when they entered, and this would be to the community's immeasurable benefit. What do we make of this before we break? Criminal gang problem. There is no country in the world that does not have a criminal gang presence within its borders. No starker is the evidence of wasted human resources, often useful, and certainly being left out of the community's productive setup. These individuals may have been the product of non functional or dysfunctional families, poverty, non mentorship, or bad mentorship. The community has not provided adequately for them either through education, employment, or basic social welfare or housing. The scene is set for the neighborhood criminal to fill this vacuum with promises of easy money, easy tasks. The candidate, not seeing easier alternatives for providing for himself and family, invariably takes up the opportunity, and there begins the life of the criminal. This vocation often ends in death for the individual. Leavitt and Sadier in the 1980s and 1990s carried out valuable research at great personal risk on criminal gangs in the gang neighborhoods of Chicago, USA, particularly revealing the hierarchical structures and pay scales of the members. What this research showed that much like any corporate business, the lowest rung members, the street level members, those who usually took the greatest risk in terms of life, limb, and incarceration, earned just around minimum wage at the time, about $3.50 an hour. Those just above this level, the street captains, earned about $100,000 a year. And for those above this level, neighborhood leaders earned $200,000 a year. Those at the top of the enterprise, the turf leaders, earned about $400,000. Research further revealed that the lowest rung members suffer a kill rate of 25%. That is a 25% rate of being killed by rival gang members. The gang members higher up the chain of command also suffer high kill rates and even higher incarceration rates. These risks should be unacceptable to the ignorant foot soldier, but the illusion of bling and the good life that the drug lord provides is too great an attraction to decline. Under SVT, the opportunities and conditions for gainful employment would be such that it would negate the need to engage in risky and criminal activities to provide for oneself and one's family. If such persons could be shown these statistics, as well as be provided with a gainful alternative, criminal gang problem, which is at the root of the crime problem for many countries, could be defeated. I remain convinced that if human beings are provided with the means to make a decent living for themselves and their families, crime would be a thing of the past, and a veritable utopia of peace and harmony could finally exist on earth. What are your comments regarding this? Terrorism, civil strife, and sectarianism. These three phenomena are a representation of the complete failure of the economic system and the use of extremist methods to failure. Human beings are naturally imbued with peace and harmony, and to have any collection of them resort to terrorism, sectarianism, or civil strife suggests that the system has failed catastrophically. Regardless of the racial, religious, or sectarian differences within a country, any system that allows one part to have economic dominion over the other will bring forth the extremism that we are witnessing all over the world today. Look at the examples of these around the world, whether it is the Middle East, Syria, Iraq, Israel, and Palestine, North and West and East Africa, Europe, France, United Kingdom, Belgium, Spain, and Germany, Asia, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, North America, Canada, and the United States. The incidences of extremism are not declining, although intelligence activities of detection and interdiction proven steadily since the start of the century. There must be some underlying reason why these extremist actions persisted. What is evident is that young persons all over the world are either gainfully unemployed or underemployed and are finding it frustratedly difficult to find acceptable employment upon which they can rely on in terms of in the long term and for which they can plan their lives. Many fall outside of the fortunate group that finds some form of work. Consequently, many fall prey to any movement that propagate extremist views, especially on the internet. Because society isn't taking care of them, they become susceptible to any promise that will give them a better life, either here or in the hereafter. To seek to just stamp out these extremist elements without addressing the root of the problem is folly. And as long as more persons find themselves without acceptable living conditions, these phenomena. What about this? Any comments here? Presumably successful U.S. presidency of Barack Obama, 2009 to 2017, has been succeeded by a Donald Trump, who is considered an outlier as far as the American presidency is concerned. How did he manage to be elected? Well, because a significant number of voters were not happy with their economic circumstances and decided to elect an outlier to see if he can improve their circumstances. This presidency too will end in failure because the underlying root of economic imbalance between the factors of production are not being addressed. This failure will be replicated all around the world, especially in Europe, whose peoples have studiously avoided experimenting with extremist governments. This then is the dilemma facing the world today. Will it continue to invest in tried and failed economic systems, or will it go back to the first principles, which has been widely espoused by our economic fathers, Adam Smith, David Ricardo, Henry George, John Stuart Mill, to name a few? The United Nations is in the unique position of doing the research into what these gentlemen have said and determine whether they are relevant to the economic redemption of our world. These sessions are dedicated to that redemption and to re examining the various economic principles espoused by them. I am confident that this is the direction in which the solutions lie. What about this? Next week, we will continue our discussion on these new subjects: public and private sectors, natural resources, and ownership policy. Before we end, I would like again to let you attendees know that On Sustainable Development is an educational offering devoted to the dissemination of its course to all of mankind and to those who have the English language as their official language, all eventually all over the world. We have in fact been sending this course all over the English speaking world with favorable responses. To continue to make this possible, and because we do not charge a fee for this dissemination, we rely wholeheartedly on monetary donations to meet the cost of achieving these goals. If you have found these sessions useful thus far and would like others to have access to them, we would gratefully accept your donations should you be inclined to offer them. You can send donations to our PayPal account at the email address notebroker2001 at yahoo.com. Thank you for your kind gesture. As indicated before, you can communicate with us by going to our Facebook page on sustainable development or our YouTube channel, Balancing the Economy. We will respond to all your comments or questions. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, press the alert button to get notices that our latest session has been posted. All sessions are archived at our Facebook page. Please please share with your family, friends, and acquaintances.